Okay, so I am Winzeth De La Rosa, and I am the next reporter, and I will be discussing what instrument will we use to collect data. Let's suppose that you are going to collect performance, attitudinal, or observational data. So all these data, or through the process of data collection, involve an instrument. So, what appropriate instrument are you going to use to collect your data? Will you find one to use, or or develop one yourself? So, if you search for one to use, how will you locate these instruments? How are you going to find your instrument? Once you find the instrument, what criteria will you use to determine if it is a good instrument to use or not? So, all these questions are what we are going to find out in my discussion. So, sit back and relax as we progress our discussion. So, when it comes to getting an instrument for your research, you've got three main options. First off, you can make your own, which sounds cool but can be pretty tough and time consuming though. Second, you can find one that already exists and tweak it to fit according to your needs. So this is a bit easier because you're not starting from the scratch. And finally, you can just grab an existing instrument and use it as is. Now, the easiest route is usually to find something that's already out there and either use it as it is or make some small changes to suit it to your study. When you modify an existing instrument, you usually have to get permission from whoever made it originally. They might even want to see how you change it and what results you get from using it. But sometimes you might not find exactly what you need, especially if your study is super specific. In that case, you're looking at option one, which is creating your own instrument. This involves a bunch of steps like figuring out exactly what you want your instrument to do, looking at what's already been done in the research world, writing out your questions, and then testing them on people similar to those you'll be studying. So there's this method recommended by Benson and Clark that breaks down the process into four phases, which entails planning, constructing, evaluating, and making sure your questions actually do what they're supposed to do, which is called validating the instrument. So it's a bit of a journey. But if you're into that kind of thing, it can be pretty rewarding. So don't worry about the technical stuff like calculating reliability and doing item analysis. There are computer programs out there that can handle all that for us as a researchers. So whether you're customizing, tweaking, or starting from scratch, there's a way to get the right instrument for your research. Let's assume that you've decided to use an existing instrument for your study, okay? Um, because usually the folks who made it or the author who made that particular instrument will ask you to cough up some cash for using it. It's like renting a tool from their hardware store but for research. Now, finding the perfect instrument that measures all your important stuff like your independent, dependent, and control variables can be a bit like searching for a needle in a haystack. Sometimes you might have to get creative and piece together parts from different instruments to make your own, like sort of Franken instrument. But don't stress out too much. There are some tricks to help you in your research. One handy trick is to dig into published journal articles. Authors often spill the beans about the instruments they used and might even throw in a few sample questions or items so you can get a feel for what it's all about. So roll up your sleeves, dive into those articles, and who knows, you might just find the perfect instrument hiding in plain sight. Here are the steps in developing or constructing an instrument. So it consists of four phases. So in the very first phase is planning. So here, this is where you state the purpose of the tests and identify the target groups. What do you want the instrument to achieve, and who will be using it? Also, identify and define the domain of the tests. What construct or variable are you trying to measure? So it also needs to review the literature on the construct or variable of interest. You should learn what others have done to measure this concept. So we should provide or give open-ended question to the target group, get a sense of their experiences and perspectives related to what you are measuring. Also, you are to write objectives, or what do you want users to be able to do with the instrument, or your respondents. So select item format. Will you use multiple choice, true, false, or open-ended questions? That's up to you, as long as that's suitable or appropriate, um, for your research variables. So, and the next phase, which is construction, here you are to develop a table of specifications. This table will outline the content areas you will cover in your instrument and how many questions will be devoted to each. And also, um, you have to hire and train item writers. If you're not writing the question yourself, you'll need to find people who can do the job well. So write a pool of items. Write more questions than you think you'll need. Also, to validate content. This means you have to make sure your questions are actually measuring what you intend them to measure. You can do this by having experts review your questions. So, also develop or revise items based on the feedback you get. You may need to rewrite some of your questions. So, yeah, that's all for the second phase. Now, let's elevate to the third phase, which is quantitative evaluation. So in this phase, first is are to prepare the instrument for the first pilot test. This means formatting it and making sure it looks professional. Next is to administer the first pilot test. So this is to give the instrument to a small group of people from your target audience. Debrief the subjects. Ask them about their experience taking the instrument. Were the questions clear? Did they take too long to complete? Those are the questions. Those are just a few questions that you have to consider. Calculate reliability. This is a statistical measure of how consistent the instrument is. Also, you can run item analysis. These will help you identify any questions that are not performing well. You are also to revise the instrument, make changes based on the feedback you received, and prepare for the second pilot test. So the last but not least phase is validation. So here, you are to administer the second pilot test as well. So give the revised instrument to another small group of people from your target audience. Same, run item analysis, see if your revisions made a difference. Repeat steps of revision, pilot, administration, and item analysis. You may need to do this a few times until you are confident that your instrument is valid and also reliable. Begin validation. So this is a more formal process of collecting evidence to support your claims you are making about your instrument. Administer the instrument for validation data. So give the instrument to a larger group of people from your target audience. And continue validations, the last. Uh, Analyze the data to see if it supports your claim. So, if you find an instrument already, so there are actually criteria, several criteria that we can use to assess whether it is a good instrument or not. So there are questions that we can consider, and questions that we can ask ourselves. So the first one, have authors developed the instrument recently, and can you obtain the most recent version? So this is about the recent development as the status of the instrument. You got you got you got to check if the instrument has been recently developed, and if the latest version is accessible. With the rapid evolution of knowledge and educational research, instruments over 5 years old might be considered like it's outdated. Authors typically update their instruments periodically to stay current. So another question is that, is the instrument widely cited by other authors? So this is basically about the widespread citation of the instrument. Evaluate if the instrument is widely cited by other authors. Frequent use by researchers suggests its endorsement and indicates whether the questions on the instruments provide still are reliable and consistent measures. Uh, so next question that we can ask ourselves is, are reviews available for the instrument? So yeah, it's about availability of reviews. So look for the published reviews about the instrument, such as journals, any journals, um, like measurement and evaluation and counseling and development, for instance. When we do reviews, it indicates that other researchers have taken the instrument seriously and sought to document its worth. Yeah. So the next one is there information about the reliability and validity of scores from past uses of the instrument? So it it's about reliability and validity. You are to investigate whether information about the reliability and validity of scores from past users of the instrument is available. This will help determine the consistency and accuracy of the instrument's measurements. Uh, Other question is that, does the procedure for recording data fit the research questions or hypothesis in your study? So fit for research questions or hypothesis. No? So we are to consider whether the procedure for recording data aligns with the research questions or hypothesis that we formulated in our study, ensuring compatibility between the instruments and the research objectives is crucial for obtaining meaningful results. The last questions can be, does the instrument contain accepted scales of measurement? So accepted scales of measurement. Um, so verify if the instrument contains accepted scales of measurement. So this ensures that the instrument's metrics align with the established standards, facilitating accurate interpretation of results. So these criteria I have mentioned, particularly reliability and validity, recording procedures, and scales of measurement, play a crucial role in assessing the suitability of the instrument for research purposes. Since reliability and validity are paramount importance, um, as they were mentioned in my discussion regarding the criteria for choosing a good instrument. So I will explore further these ideas in more depth. So, um, so what are these reliability and validity? So imagine you're measuring the height of a tree. You want a reliable and valid measurement, right? So in research, this is same with research that reliability and validity are like the sturdiness and accuracy of your measuring tool. So this is what they mean, like starting with the reliability. A reliable research instrument gives consistent results when used multiple times. So think of a sturdy ruler. If you measure that tree today and again tomorrow, you should get the same height, assuming that tree isn't growing overnight. So, um, and there are reasons that make an instrument unreliable. The first concern or first issue is that there is unclear questions. So if the questions are confusing or open to interpretation, of course, participants might answer differently each time. So second is inconsistent procedures. If the way the instrument is administered changes, like for an instance, giving instruction differently each time, it can potentially affect the results. The Also the participant factors like are such as tiredness, nervousness, or guessing on a test can lead to inconsistent responses, and that affects the results of your study. Meanwhile, validity, so this is basically measuring what you intend to measure. So a valid instrument truly measures what it claims to measure. So going back to the tree example that I gave, if your ruler is broken and measures an inch off, it wouldn't be valid for measuring that tree's height. So here is the researchers assess validity. How the researchers assess the validity of the instrument. So choosing an instrument, the first step is finding the instrument relevant to your research. Also examining past studies. Researchers look for evidence of validity in past studies that used the instruments, where they check how the instrument was used in those studies, how researchers interpreted the scores, did they believe the instrument measured what was supposed to, and whether the authors provided convincing arguments linking their interpretations to how they used these scores. So, in a nutshell, by considering both reliability and validity, researchers ensure their instruments are like sturdy and accurate rulers, producing trustworthy data for their investigations. So, we've talked about finding a good research instrument, but how do we know if the questions actually give us useful information? So this is where measurement scales come in. Think of them like answer choices on a test. The better the answer choices, the more we can learn from the question. So what is measurement scales? Scales of measurement are response options to questions that measure or observe variables in categorical or continuous units. It is important to understand scales of measurement to assess the quality of an instrument and to determine the appropriate statistics to use in data analysis. So, there are actually three main types of measurement scales. So we have the nominal scales. So this basically like the multiple choice. These are are like basic multiple choice questions with no particular order. For example, asking someone their gender, male or female, that uses a nominal scale. Another type of measurement scale is ordinal scales. So this is like a ranking scale, if you will. Imagine a ranking question where you pick number one for the best and so on, Ordinal scales are similar, but instead of questions, cho- they are answer choices with an order. An example might be asking someone to rank their satisfaction from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. Another type is interval or ratio scale. So these are like those slider bars you use to adjust volume. The answer choices are like positions on the slider, and the distances between choices are assumed to be equal. A common example is the Likert scale, so where you rate your agreement from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So, which do you think scale is the best? So in educational research, we usually shoot for interval or ratio scales because it gives us the most data to work with. This let us do more powerful statistical analysis, kind of like having more answer choices on a test that allows for more no one's answers. But here is a key takeaway. The best skill is the one that truly fits the question you are asking. So don't force like weird rating scale in a question that just needs a simple yes or no answer. So if you're not sure which scale to use, it's always better to create an interval or continuous scale, like a rating scale. You can always simplify it later if needed, but you can't add more information that wasn't collected in the first place. So we've talked about how to find the right question and craft a solid research instrument. At this point, let's talk about actually collecting that data. How will you administer the data collection? This might sound simple, but there are a few things to keep in mind to make sure your data is reliable and you're treating everybody, your participants, and also other people involved in your studies, will be involved ethically. So first, we have the standardization. Uh, Keeping things consistent is the key here. So imagine you're giving a pop quiz. If you explain the question differently to each student, the quiz wouldn't be fair, right? So this same goes where for data collection, we need to use standard procedures no matter how we're collecting data, either in the form of a surveys, interviews, or observations. This means using the same instruction and following the same process for everyone involved. So the reasons are uh, is to uh, sustain fairness. All the while, standard procedures ensure everyone has an equal chance to participate and answer the question properly. Also, reliable data. If we collect data differently each time, it's going to be messy and hard to compare. Through standardization, this keeps things clean and consistent. So how do we standardize? I'm going to tell you the written procedures. So you are to create a clear roadmap for how to collect data, like a recipe for research. So training as well. If you have helpers, train them on the exact procedures to follow. Think of it like training waiters at the restaurant. Everyone needs to know the steps. Let's now go to ethical practices. So this basically means respecting people and places. So data collection is all about getting information, but we need to do it respectfully. So this is what I mean. So permission is a key. What I mean by that is always get permission before collecting any data. It's like asking to borrow something before you take it. And let's always bear in mind that privacy matters. Keep people's identities confidential, at most confidential. This means using numbers or codes instead of names. Of course, respect decisions. People have the right to say no if they don't want to get involved in your studies. Don't pressure them to participate if they're not comfortable. Also, minimize disruption. Research can be a little disruptive, like a visitor in your house. Be mindful of the environment and keep distractions to a minimum. So as we follow these steps as a researcher, we can collect data that's both reliable and ethical. Let's just remember that research is a conversation, and treating participants with respect is key to getting good information. So we've figured out what question to ask and how to ask them. Now comes the fun part, actually getting the answers. But data collection isn't just grabbing into willy-nilly. There are 5 key steps to follow to ensure we get reliable and ethical data. So here I'm going to state the 5 steps in the process of quantitative data collection. So the first is um, identify how to select participants for your study. So yeah, this is where you pick your people or where you select your participants. So this is like choosing the players for your research game. First, you need to define who your target audience is, your population. Then you pick a smaller group to actually study. This is what you call the sample. There are ways to choose the sample fairly, kind of like picking team in a gym class. So the second step is identify the permissions needed for your study. This is your permission to proceed. Basically, in layman's term, getting the okay. You know, before you dive in, you need permission from the people involved. This might involve getting the go-ahead from institutions, specific sites, the participants themselves, and parents if they're minors, and even a university review board. Think of it like asking your friends' parents if you call or hang out at their house. Yeah. So the next step is list different options for collecting information. So this is like choosing your weapons. Information gathering. So what kind of information are you after? This depends on your research question, of course. Are you measuring performance, attitudes, or behaviors? There are different types of data for each, like test scores, surveys, or observations. Okay, another step is locate, select, and assess an instruments for use in data collection. So, another way to say it is finding the right tools or instruments. Imagine you need to measure height. A rusty ruler wouldn't do, right? So the same goes for data collection. You need instruments like surveys or tests that are reliable and valid. There might already be good ones out there, or you might need to create your own. So the last step, which is to describe procedures for administering quantitative data collection. So this is where you put it all together, administering the data collection. So yeah, these steps, this is where we finally, it's a time to collect the data. This process needs to be standardized, meaning everyone involved follow the same procedures, just like following the rules of a game. Consistency is a key. And on top of that, we always need to be ethical and respectful of the people and places involved in our studies or research. So, all those aforementioned steps, and by following these 5 steps, we can collect data that's strong and trustworthy. So, uh, giving your research a solid foundation, indeed. So, yeah, so this concludes my discussion. I hope you learned a lot from what I have shared with you. Thank you so much for listening.